need to know is Pulaski was an industrial town. And the source of the power came from the river. And I think that's where Dave's gonna kinda go to with the dams, cause at least the three that I know of were definitely used for water power.
Okay, well, so now you know who I am. Throw this first card away. I grew up in Pulaski. Actually lived all but about, let's say, 10 years of my life in the same house down on Maple Ave, just down the street here. And the house I was fortunate enough to grow up in was right on the river. It was also right down the street from my grandmother's house, a little brick house down, further down on Maple Ave on the river. It was a place where I swam upstream from the village, because at that time there was no sewer system in the river, so it was only safe to swim upstream from my grandmother's house, and that probably wasn't all that safe. But we did spend a lot of time in the river. We tubed, I kayaked, and I actually worked guiding rafts down the river. So some of these dam sites we're going to talk about today, I had a little different perspective, being out in the middle of the river and looking at where the sites were, and I think it gives me a little bit of a different look at it. And I mentioned my grandmother, Della Mahaffy. I used to spend many afternoons down at her house mowing the lawn in the summertime. It used to take me about an hour and a half, I think, and then another hour and a half eating cookies and drinking milk and looking at old pictures of Pulaski, family pictures, and just talking about things that had to do with the local area. And one of the things we used to talk about a lot was my grandfather's wool carding mill, which was at the mouth of Spring Brook, down on Maple Ave, the edge of our property, where the waterfalls in Spring Brooks enters the Salmon River. There was also a bookboard factory there that was in the family. So we used to talk a lot about that and everything it took to operate those mills. I think these talks with my grandmother really fostered my love of history, and especially the local history, and in a lot of cases my family history, which was really attached to the local history. The reason why I'm here today, and I'm charged with this duty, is I really like to talk about local history when I get the chance. Well, I found out, don't talk about it around Larry Petrie. Because if you do that, you'll probably be standing up here at some point. No, actually it's a real pleasure to be here and be able to do this. And like I said, some of this is really close to home with me. I got 3x5 cards. I'm kind of nervous here because I've been thinking about this, and when I heard it was a brown bag lunch, I made a joke earlier that my brown bag was shaped in the shape of a wine bottle. But no, that's not serious. First, I'd like to let you know I'm not an expert on the dams of Pulaski, and I'm not an expert on local history. I like to think I know a little bit about it, but a lot of what I've come up with today to present to you comes from research that I've done, but a lot of it has come from the conversations I had with my grandmother. Please feel free to ask questions at any time. Correct me if you know something different, or add to anything I may present, because I think the goal here is definitely to get a little better understanding of what talk about the dams that were specifically here in Pulaski, I'm gonna tell you a little bit about the dam construction of the time in the 1800s. Many of these dams, the dams actually were referred to as low-head dams. Or a more common name for them was run-of-the-river dams. There were tens of thousands built throughout the 1800s in the United States. These dams extended from one bank to the other, and I think that's where you get the name run-of-the-river dams, because they block the whole river from one bank to the other. Not all of the dams were a straight shot across the river, a straight dam, and you'll see that when we, in your handout. In fact, on the front page, you'll see the Prairie Dam, which is definitely not a straight dam, that was an angled dam, and we'll get into a little bit more of why that could have been a little later. These dams were upwards of 12 feet high, although I don't think any of the dams in Pulaski were that high. I think they were a little bit lower, and again, to find that information out is almost impossible. I found that out, I've looked back. A lot of the records of dams being built in New York State start about the time, the early 1900s, and go up. So there isn't a whole lot of record of these dams being built or the specifics on them. Most of these dams were constructed of log crib work secured to the bottom of the riverbed with iron rods. Then they were filled with the river stone. And that was the case with the dams in Pulaski. They were log crib work dams. The dams were designed to divert water into raceways, spillways, flumes to power the mills of the area. Seasonally, the dams were in need of repair for obvious reasons. I learned a new word while I was researching, freshet. Have you ever heard of a freshet? That's the spring flood, when the ice leaves the river. It's referred to as a freshet. Well, these freshets would devastate a lot of these dams. So they were in constant need of repair, especially in the spring or any other times of high water. Well, living on the river as I do, the property, the deeds for the properties on the river, and I think even newer deeds to this day still read that you own to the center of the river. So you own the riverbed, can't do anything. The river deeds, so you have a problem with that. Don't try to put any dams up or move any rocks out there, because they'll frown on that. So in order to build a dam back in that time, the mill owner would have to own property on the river and property on the opposite bank, or partner with someone on the opposite bank to build a dam across. Regulations varied by state and area, and I think by today's standards they would have been considered very lax, because there were dams everywhere, pretty much tens of thousands, as I said earlier. One downside to the dams on the Salmon River was that it impeded the spawning run of the landlocked salmon. And that led to the disappearance of the landlocked salmon in 1872. The state did enact laws in 1852 to try to protect the salmon and protect the spawning runs. And the law, just to shorten it up a little bit, allowed dam owners to build ladders over their dams not allowed to collect any of the fish that came up those ladders. So I'm gonna guess that probably a lot of them didn't do it, and it, you know, they may have impeded the flow so much, or the salmon run might have been dwindling so much at that time from overfishing that they maybe didn't bother. But none of the dams in the research I've done have I heard mention of a fish ladder or seen a fish ladder on the dam. Let's see, let's get right to the dams, and these are the dams of the Salmon River, and I'm gonna do it kind of as the water flows downstream, so I'm gonna start upstream. And the dam that was furthest upstream in Pulaski was the Prairie Dam. And I'll get into specifics of where it is in a minute. I'm just gonna name the dams off. The first one was the Prairie Dam, and then below that was the Long Dam, also known as the McChesney, or in later years, the Cider Dam. And then this one kind of baffles me. I've got it in my head that it was called the Angle Dam, but you know, it was probably better known as the Utley Dam or the Butler Dam in later years. And then below that, I don't know where they got this name, but it was the Lower Dam, lower down on the river, I guess. But it was also known as the Box and Bennett Dam. There was a fifth dam on the river, known as the Upper Dam. The exact location, I'm not sure. The accounts I read didn't pin it down to an exact spot. But the dam was torn out by ice in 1876 and then replaced by the Long Dam. So I'm gonna guess that it was probably in that vicinity somewhere, where the Long Dam is, and we'll get into where that was located in a minute. But those are the four dams of the Salmon River that we're gonna talk about today. I'm gonna start with the Prairie Dam. Obviously, it's further upstream, and it's located about 150 yards, 250, maybe, or 150 yards to 200 yards upstream from the Route 81 bridge where it crosses the river, which, if you're like me, I've probably been over that stretch of Route 81 to look up there maybe 5 times in my life, only because I missed the exit during a snowstorm or something, so, you know, never to go sightseeing. But, okay, this dam really is the closest to my heart, because this provided power for my great-grandfather's wool carding mill, and also the bookboard factory down at the mouth of Spring Brook. Amazingly, those mills, the woolen mill and the bookboard factory, were located almost a mile downstream from the location of Prairie Dam. And this dam is where I played. And I think Bart, we might have spent some time, Marilyn, spent some time up there. Marilyn might have been the one skinny dipping up there. But I can remember as we used to walk up through that area. Didn't so much swim there, but we walked up through that area to get to the local swimming hole, which is Farrington's or the Trestle hole further upstream. But I can remember seeing a large flat rock in the area where the Prairie Dam was. And this flat rock, I mean, I was probably 12 years old, was huge. I mean, it was like, actually it's probably like this, because I was 12, everything looked huge like that, but it was maybe this big, and had, I really don't know how many names carved in it, and names and dates carved in it.
Great picnic spot.
Great picnic spot, yeah, it's all flat rock. You can see why they picked that spot to build the dam, actually, because the river drops away and it's flat rocks on either side. And I'm gonna apologize right off the bat, this is the one I know the most about, so this is the one almost right now, so. But my grandmother told me that these were the names of the people that were charged to maintain the dam, release the water, make sure the flow of the dam, the water into the spillway was correct, and just basically be a caretaker to the dam. And she also explained that they were most likely from each of the mills that were benefiting from the water held back by the Prairie Dam. So I remember her talking about taking turns and shift work basically to go there and maintain the dam and watch over it. This rock that I speak of with the names, though, unfortunately, I've looked for it a couple times. Hasn't been seen since the flood of 1984. So it's probably buried or at the bottom of the river somewhere up there, or maybe in my backyard. Who knows? The water's pretty powerful. As you can see on the picture, the Prairie Dam was V-shaped and kind of like a bow of a ship facing upstream. The best guess as to why it was shaped this way was probably to divert water from the center of the river over to where it entered into the spillway. And another idea might be that it might withstand more pressure, much like the bow of a ship would, with the current coming down. I think I'll go with the first one though, because the spillway was very important, had to be filled. The dam diverted the water, as I said, into what was known as the Spring Brook spillway. If you drive down County Route 2A past the Village Reservoir and Water Tank, make the turn by, and I'm using landmarks, probably some of you may not know, the old Troopers Barracks. There's a field right off that curve, and then there's a tree line. In that tree line is the remains of the old spillway, which was a hand dug or for the most part probably hand dug trench. And when Route 81 went in, that blocked that one end of it over there. If you walk down at the Haldane Center on the new trails down there along the softball field, there's a ridge line and then Route 81 off through the trees. Well, that spillway is in those trees, and it would have entered Spring Brook just downstream from the second bridge on Maple Ave Extension or the old Centerville Road. So this spillway, when the water was released there, increased the flow of Spring Brook, which comes down the backside of Maple Ave, or at that time was known as Mill Street. It filled the mill pond that my grandfather used the power from, the water from, to power his wool carding mill at Spring Brook. And that's where Spring Brook ends, so it makes a 90-degree turn and comes towards the river there. They extended the spillway off that turn in the creek behind where the mill pond was. And it continued on down behind Maple Ave or Mill Street, and then went underground right over here behind the old ironworks, which is now Healthway, and continued underground, actually right across the front lawn of the museum here. And you said when the tree, yeah, you can tell that.
Okay. Well, at one point, when Barb, whatever her last name was our gardener. Was our gardener. She came in one day and said to me, "Mary Lou, you need to come see this hole in the ground." I don't care about a hole in the ground, but she insisted. So when I got out there and looked, here's this hole about this big around, all laid up with riverstone. And apparently through the, even though it had been cut off, through the years there was just enough drip, 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 that finally that whole thing fell through. And then you know, we covered it back up, but it was part of the spillway that came back from the Ontario Ironworks across in Big River.
I learned one thing about that, where it went underground out here, is when I was a kid, it's don't go in there because you're gonna get yelled at by your parents. Well, it wasn't so much you, I think we kept it secret from you.
I didn't know a thing
This is
about it.
That's
a lot I didn't know.
We had visions of going all the way through it to the river, and whether that was possible, I'm not sure. It was a little sketchy for a kid. So. But the spillway, as I said, went underground through the front of the museum here and entered the river right across the street in the area between Coal Muffler and the end zone in the parking lot there. The spillway provided water power for obviously the woolen mill, the bookboard factory, and Ontario Ironworks, also the Towner Box Factory. I'm losing everything up here. Towner Box Factory and the Wilder Sawmill and Lumber Company, which were across the street. A side note, this is kind of a disgusting side note, but one my grandmother always would tell me, she'd tell me this every time we talked about it, is that they use the water to flush that spillway out because the sewers from the homes, some of the bigger homes and businesses up on Jefferson Street and Delano Street flowed into that. And this time of year it was important to keep the flow going through there, so it also served that purpose too. You know, as much as we want to romanticize about the old times in town here and everything like that, there were probably some things that were a little less than desirable. But as I said, this continued underground and entered over here across the street and at a location that would have been below our next dam, the Long Dam. The Long Dam also had other names, and the names came from basically the mills and factories that it served. The Long Dam was also known as the McChesney Dam, and then later on known as the Cider Dam. And it could have been known by other names, but those are the ones that kept popping up. And, you know, as I said, the research I found discrepancies too. So, you know, those are the names I'm gonna go with, but I'll refer to it as the Long Dam. And as you can imagine, and you can see on your handout, and I believe there might be 2 pages of those pictures. Yeah, there are. It kind of gives you different perspectives, different season. But as you can see, it's a pretty long dam. And extended from behind where Coal Muffler is over here, all the way across the river to the site of the old, around the old Niagara Mohawk building. And I don't know, on Lewis Street, I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. Hasn't been a Niagara Mohawk building for years. But
It was originally a cider mill.
yes, a cider mill, yeah. And I believe it was McChesney cider mill.
Yes.
at one time,
No.
yeah.
Not McChesney.
Box.
Box, yeah.
Box, or-
Yeah. Well, I found it called McChesney cider mill. So there may be a discrepancy.
McChesney's also had a
Table.
furniture and table
Right,
company.
which was also the Salmon River
Right.
Cable Company.
Yeah.
Right. And that's exactly where I was going with this.
Oh,
I said it provided power to the McChesney, or you said the
Box,
Box.
B-O-X.
Okay, box. Okay, and I'm gonna get to something, and maybe this explains it, a discrepancy I found. Okay, the cider mill, which was over there by the old 9-mile building, and then McChesney or Salmon River Table Factory. one of the main purposes of that dam though was to divert water into a canal that went under Lewis Street and paralleled Canal Street, which is now Glen Ave, down to the point where Napa is today, and River House parking lot. In fact, just until, well, the bridge over it, over on Lewis Street is still there, but it's a dry bridge. And there was a bridge railing near Napa that just in the past 2 or 3 years, I believe they took out and replaced that with a big plastic culvert type thing. So that, in that canal, its purpose was to provide power to Ontario Mills, which was down in that area. Was that the only mill that you know of that it provided power to, the canal itself?
I can't think of any others
Yeah,
down in that area.
I couldn't find others either. Now this is where the discrepancy may be. I did find where it said that the Long Dam provided water power to the Towner box factory.
Yes,
Did it?
yes.
It did.
And then there
Even
was
though-
something called was it the Red Mill?
Okay.
That was down in that same area.
Okay, yeah, and I did see that also, but why I was questioning it is because the Towner box factory, where it was located for the most part, was benefited from the Spring Brook spillway, mostly, and was there, a way I don't know how they would have drawn power from the Long Dam, which was the other side, upstream from that.
I don't know, they had a power plant right there that
Okay.
they brought, probably steam. I
Okay.
don't know exactly how they
Okay,
did it, but
okay.
there was a,
So that might have been it, so that was.
you
probably
see
a
where the
factor.
fire took place at the Tolner Mill, you can see what's left of
Mhm.
a power plant. Looked like a big steam producing.
Right. So that was one that I kind of questioned because I didn't, seeing what I could see, and I knew where the Towner box factory was, and I knew that they drew power off the spillway. I wasn't quite sure on that, so that's good to know. That's why we're here today. In any case, the canal then went down, as I said, the Ontario Mills, entered the river near the Napa parking lot in that area there. And that was below our third dam, which I'm gonna call the Angle Dam because it's, as you can see, it's angled on the picture, but probably better known, after further discussion, better known as the Utley Dam and then later the Butler Dam. Does anybody remember Butler Lumber Company?
Used to work there.
Yeah, the Butlers took over Utley's mill, I guess, and then went from there and formed the lumber company. I didn't realize that. Went back that far. The Angle Dam, okay, it was known as also Utley Dam or the Butler Dam. And it was located right below the Long Bridge, and as you can see, there's definitely an angle.
Sure.
Or Short Bridge, did I say Long Bridge?
Yeah.
Sorry. Pink eye. The dam, that dam serviced mainly just the 80 custom mills, which later became Utley Mills, and then the Butler Mill. And that was, the mill itself was located, and this is kind of important to visualize, near the substation down on River Street, the sewage I guess that's sewer substation down there, near the original River Park or River Walk.
River Walk.
Yes, River Walk, thank you. Yeah. Okay. And that may explain why the dam was angled. I really didn't find any information as to why it was built the way it was. My thought is, if that canal, the Long Dam Canal, came into the river near Napa, and the Utley, here, this is the Utley Mill, this is where the Long Dam Canal comes in, the river's flowing this way. it's downstream from that. They couldn't build a dam downstream from where that canal came in, because it would obviously back the water up and defeat the purpose of the mill, or the power of the water coming through by gravity. So my thought is they probably went upstream from that to a point to the center of the river, and then angled it downstream to the mill, so they could provide water there. That's one of the, probably the best explanation for that. Again, don't have proof. Another one that I thought of is, if you own the riverbed, you can't get somebody to partner with you right directly across the river. Then maybe you'd have to go upstream and reconfigure your dam. But I think it makes more sense that the mill was actually downstream from where the canal entered, and it would have defeated the purpose of the canal.
Which side of the river was the mill on?
The mill was on the west side, or the side towards River Street, opposite of Napa. So, and slightly downstream from where the canal came from the long dam. So that's why I'm thinking they went upstream, built the dam, and then angled it down to the mill, just to back up the water to create a flow used there. So, no,
On the other side though.
it would have been on the other side. So if you know what, I'm gonna give you you get the hard copy here. I'm gonna give you an idea.
No, I was just thinking on
Yeah,
the
this,
side that the angle was, that's all
okay,
lower water too.
right, well, that's the Long Bridge, so it came out and then angled this way. So this part is this. So,
Flush it over.
and this is probably where the canal came in, okay? And then, so they angled it, they went upstream, put the dam there, and angled it down, so they could provide this, no, that mill is long gone. In fact, Utley's Mill, I think before the flood in 1984, you may have remembered looking downstream, there was like a concrete foundation that was still left in there.
On River Street.
On River Street, and I'm gonna guess that's probably the site of the mill, so.
That was, yeah, I'm sure that was part of it,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, okay, we're on here. Okay, this, that dam, the Utley Dam, the Butler Dam, was actually the last dam left intact on the Salmon River. And I found the date to be kind of amazing. It was taken out by ice and high water in March of 1934. So it was there and intact for quite a few years.
I remember
So,
1934. We had no 1934,
you-
I was
you're-
coming home from school,
Okay,
and we said, the ice is out, or coming out.
and it's
It
gonna
was
get,
coming
it's about to
downstream.
begin, right?
It's, you got a lot of water, and the ice came way up on the banks.
Mm-hmm. So you remember that
I
flood
do.
then, yeah. You said it was a pretty,
I'm very old,
yeah.
and I haven't got off the street yet.
Okay. Moving right along. We're gonna go downstream even further now to the fourth and final dam in Pulaski. This was known as the lower dam, or also known as the Box Bennett Dam. The dam was located just downstream from the Long Bridge on Factory Street, which is now Forest Drive. This dam was definitely, it was a long dam. It doesn't look like, if you look down there now, the river isn't that wide, but this was a fairly long dam, because from high water mark to the bank down there was quite a distance. And there were some pretty elaborate raceways and things down River Street. I don't know if, hopefully you've all been able to walk that or get down there. Well, you should. Maybe I'll give you some ammo to get you going there. But go down there, actually it'd be kinda hard to see this time of year, but in the fall, it's beautiful, just dodge the fishermen. In the spring, you probably could see quite a bit also.
That was my turf when I was a kid.
Yeah, see,
So I lived in that. That used to, overflow with the ice flow and cover that entire area down through there, and they came and bulldozed a lot of
Oh, really?
parts of the raceway, filled them right in,
Yeah.
and,
But that one is still.
yeah, there's one
and
that's, one or two
really a
that's,
pretty good example
yeah.
of, what it was, and, you know, if you can get down in there, you can see that through the woods, and, you know, you keep going along Forest, I don't know how far down Forest Drive the remains,
It's only about halfway now,
Yeah,
cause they
so-
filled it in.
but it's a good way to get a visual of what it might have been like and what, you know, obviously you can see that that's what it was used for, was used to divert water through.
Is there still a tree that goes across that we used to walk across?
I don't know.
We lived on the corner
Oh,
where Madeline Rowell
Okay.
is now, the corner of Forest Drive.
yeah, I'm not sure.
We played down there.
See, it's.
I don't remember any tree down there anymore, but,
There used to be one. In
really?
fact, I got a
We'd go
picture
around
of it.
that little, on the island when the water was down, but we were always looking to make sure, cause if that water come up, we needed to get off of
I
it.
lost a pair of shoes. They were new school shoes.
That's where my father learned to swim, was at this stand. They threw him in. That's how he learned to swim.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna talk about a couple that wish they knew how to swim, in a minute here. This dam, Bill powered it, at one time a sash and blind company, or factory, and that was, I think, the mid-1800s. Also, the Pulaski Electric Light Company was down there, located down there.
Dynamo.
1900,
Yeah.
I believe. And then the most famous was the Charmaphone factory that we hear about a lot. That was
There was also a paper mill down
yeah, that
there.
would be Reed's Paper Mill, yeah.
And there was also a, distillery,
Oh,
but it was for
yeah.
linseed oil.
Down. I was wondering if that's why you spent so much time on it. Run that stuff. No, I'm not kidding. And the long dam, though, what was left of it was removed by ice that same March in 1934. So it had been damaged quite a bit and left there, but finally the rest of it was carried away that March in 1934, the same freshet that took out the Utley Dam.
In the buildings that were down there, there was a
Buildings.
fire
Okay.
that ravished the entire area, burned everything that was down that way, including what was once Charmaphone and.
Right. I was wondering about that because some of those factories, I mean, lasted well into the 1900s.
Oh, yeah, they just kept reusing them,
Yeah,
reinventing them.
Well, those are the dams. Now I've got just some other side notes I found while researching. There were two deaths that I found connected to Prairie Dam. One was in July 1919. A boy drowned there while swimming. And dams are, as a kayaker and rafter, dams are very dangerous. A lot of people don't realize that. They think it's, you know, they'll swim above, but you get below, there's hydraulics and the water turns over, so it's not surprising. Actually, I'm surprised there were only two that I could find. Two deaths, I'm sure there were probably more, but those are the two that I could find. The other was a worker that was swept over the Prairie Dam in 1881 while doing repairs. So, and then I found that in September 1890, a portion of the Prairie Dam was carried away by high water, and the flume at my great-grandfather's mill was carried out. And I don't, well, I'm gonna hold off on that for a second, because it goes with something else here. In September 1902, the Prairie Dam, the Long Dam, and the Lower Dam were heavily damaged by high water. And I'm gonna assume that at least the Lower Dam was repaired because of the Charmaphone factory dating past that. But I'm not sure of the others. And one of the reasons why I question it, because my grandfather's mill at the one time, they went from water power to an old hit and miss motor engine, and that's how they powered the mill. So, but the mill was in existence in 1902. It would have been in existence for another 32 years or so. So, I'm not quite sure when they converted over, but most of them would have converted over, because obviously in 1912, 1913, the two dams, the Venice Bridges Dam and the main dam on the Redfield that holds back the Redfield Reservoir, they were built to produce large-scale electric power. So that was the beginning of the end for self-powered mills and factories. So that's kind of all I have. I just want to cite a couple sources here. Larry was kind enough to give me information from, and I wish Larry could have been here today. Larry got me into this, he should have been here today. But,
I'll tell you, Dave, he's dying to be here.
yeah. A Pulaski Democrat through the Northern New York Library Network, a lot of information there. And the two Arcadia books, the Northern Oswego County book, the Pulaski and the Town of Richland, Salmon River Odyssey, and Terry's publication of the factory. That was very helpful. But I think one of the most important sources that I had, and kind of, you don't see it too much anymore, was my grandmother. Sitting, having milk and cookies, and talking about local history, sometimes just listening to be polite. And, but obviously somewhere there it clicked, and I came home with some information. So, thank you for having me today.